Hello, hello, and welcome to Keyboard. I am Thembi, and I am here today with Lynne Streeter Childress. I want to tell you a little bit about her before I start talking to her. She's amazing. Lynne Streeter Childress is a playwright, actor, teaching artist, singer, director, and the founder and artistic director of Building Better People Productions, an organization based in Annapolis, Maryland, that uses theater-based shows, workshops, and classes based in themes of empathy, kindness, respect, and the things that make us all better people. This is her 30th year in professional theater, with much of that experience in theater for young audiences, and we also call that TYA. This includes performing at the Kennedy Center, Arena Stage, and Adventure Theater, and teaching for institutions like the Folger Shakespeare Library, Everyman Theatre, and Baltimore School for the Arts. Through all those experiences, Lynne has seen firsthand how theater can communicate the most important things in the clearest and most interesting of ways, especially to young people. Lynne is on the Arts in Education roster for the Maryland State Arts Council and the Arts Council of Anne Arundel County, and through Building Better People Productions has worked with students served by the Arlington, Virginia Humanities Project, Arts Every Day, and the Howard County Arts Council. So she's all over the DMV. Lynne, along with fellow teaching artists Kalicia Thorpe Price and Jennifer Ridgway, facilitates Empathy Works, a program that helps organizations discover how empathetic thinking can change their company for the better. Welcome, Lynne.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good, good. I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yay. Okay, so let's jump in. What is your first memory of theater and who introduced you to it?
So I was thinking about that. I think the first that I can remember of actually going to theater was some kids' performance that I think was somewhere in Towson, Maryland. I grew up in Baltimore City, but we weren't far from Baltimore County, Maryland, and was somewhere, I want to say maybe it was affiliated with Towson State University, and it was some sort of like fairy tale kind of a thing. And I don't have a lot of memory about what the show really was, but I remember being in a darkened room with people on stage, and it just felt kind of cool. My parents took us to that, probably my mom, but maybe both of them. And but I remember though, even though it was not really theater, when I was 4 and I was in preschool, we did a Christmas concert and we had to do I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, and I was supposed to sing it, and they had a little boy dressed as Santa Claus and a little girl who was supposed to be mommy, and she's supposed to kiss him on the cheek every time I said I saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, and she missed her cue. And
Oh, no.
I at 4, my parents, I don't know what they had it on cassette, they recorded it of me going, I saw mommy kiss. They didn't kiss. So I was directing at the age of 4. And so theatrical. And of course, not of course, but growing up in church, we were singing and such since we were 5. And those things can have a theatrical sense to them.
It really emphasizes the fact that when you're exposed to the arts as a young person, you end up more likely than not being a better person. That's number one, but also just how it makes theater a part of your life in a way that's kind of second nature, right? You don't even think twice about it. It just sort of is.
It is, and that's what I mean. I didn't know if these will come up in questions later, but that's sort of kind of what happened to me and stopped me at any point if I'm rolling over further questions.
Go for it.
But I did not think that I was going to be an actor. And again, you talked about how you set this foundation, right? And you do these things when you're younger, but you don't really see how they're going to turn into something else sometime.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I was going to be a teacher or a social worker or a psychologist. My degree's in psychology. And though I sang, I played the clarinet, I was in shows pretty much some, elementary school stuff, but like middle school through high school, but it didn't seem accessible to me. Like I thought I was going to play clarinet for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra one day, and that did not happen. And I applied for School for the Arts at the high school in Baltimore, and I did not get in for clarinet. And I thought, well, maybe I would apply for vocals, but didn't. And again, my journey took me where it was supposed to take me, but I just kind of thought that that wasn't for me. And I was a psych major. And at the same time, though, in college at St. Mary's College of Maryland, I was in a band and I was on the forensics team, which is not cutting up dead people, but it's, speech and like speech. And so I was performing as that. I was doing interpretation. But when I graduated from college, I moved to Miami when my parents had moved, and I was not fully fluent in Spanish. I was not able to get social services jobs, which makes sense because that was what the majority of the population needed. So after doing Payless and another horrible customer service job, I answered an ad for a regional theater that was looking for actors for their acting apprentice program, basically going into schools to do shows that were about like important things like domestic violence and homelessness and that kind of thing. And I thought, oh, this sounds like outreach. And so at the same time, I was applying for grad schools to get my master's in social work. And I was like, okay, well, this could be a cool way. And so I went in with a song that I knew and with a monologue that I knew from the forensic circuit. And I got the job, and that was January of 1994, 30 years ago. And I stayed. I kept doing shows there, but then I also hung around and basically in some way almost worked in every department. I did some work, it was like clerical stuff, but things for like production. I did things for the development department. I held book on shows and rehearsals for when they had the really big guns come in for shows, basically because I just wanted to get my hands on all of it. And after getting into grad school, and I deferred because of money, I realized that I was really doing what I wanted to. And I stayed in theater and then got some more training. And a lot of the training, though, I had was sort of on the spot by doing it. And I was very blessed to have that opportunity to go in that way. So all that to say, like you said, because I was given those opportunities as a young person, that those things were accessible to me, I was able to draw on that to go further. And it's so important that we hold those opportunities for kids. It doesn't mean that they have to take them, but that they have the opportunities to do those things.
Yeah. And I think too, listening to you talk about your journey, it makes me think about how we are familiar with professional theater and various aspects of that, but a lot of people aren't. There are still people who think when they see professional theater that people are doing it as a hobby and they're not being paid. And, just like, oh, how nice. They don't understand the differences between like commercial, regional, community theater. And I get excited about educating people on that. But to that, I feel like folks don't necessarily know that they can make or build a living in this field. And sometimes that will guide the decision making, right?
Oh,
You'll feel
yeah.
like, okay, well, I need a fallback job, or I need, people, oh, you need a real job and those kinds of things. And so it leads us sometimes to believe that we can't build a life in theater. Now, to be clear, it's not the highest paid field in the world. We know that,
Oh, no.
right? But there are ways that you can craft a career in touching on different aspects, being a teaching artist, being a director, being an actor,
Right.
working in educational surroundings and educational contexts, right? And that's something that you do. You work in all of those different areas. Can you
Yeah.
talk about how you ended up gaining experience in those different areas and what drove you to want to, spread across and not just focus on one thing?
Right. So after I moved I moved back. Well, I'm from Baltimore originally, but I moved to the DC area back here in 95, and I lived with my grandmother and aunts. My grandmother just passed away last year at 96.
Oh, wow.
She was such a great support. But basically I lived with her, and I was like substitute teaching, and then I was temping, and then was doing dinner theater. But I sort of had a piece of all of it. Like I worked for Kaiser Permanente's educational theater programs. And that was maybe the second time that I taught, but one of the second time, but really seeing how theater could reach people as outreach. I mean, Kaiser is a health insurance company and wellness. So they did these programs because the idea is that it was some sort of like preemptive of like, if we educate kids on now, how to deal with your emotions. They had an AIDS awareness program. They had a show for little kids that was about like eating vegetables and wearing a helmet when you were on your bike. If they prepared stuff for that now, they would see less of these things later because they were dealing with it early. And so that was sort of like the beginning of, well, I did stuff at the Playhouse in Miami, but really seeing the teaching artist side of it. And then dinner theater, then I did Kennedy Center stuff. And then I was temping through a lot of this. Again, they do the stuff that pays you in between things, like if you're doing dinner theater, but you're temping in the morning, so you're able to do all this stuff. Then I gained skills, I gained office skills. And so when I got off the road for the second show that I did, I went directly into a office management position and did that for a couple of years, was still doing some stuff off and on, and then went from there to the Folger with the program called Shakespeare Steps Out that other people that we love, Deirdre, did as well later, and went to DC public schools and taught about Shakespeare to third through sixth graders in DC. And so I'd done admin stuff my first time really doing like arts admin. And I was also doing teaching in that program and also helping with their children's festival. So, it's just sort of gaining my legs. And then I went from that to working for my church for 6 years as the creative arts lead for the children. They had a big children's ministry. And so I was paid, I called it teaching artists for Jesus. I was able to do that, but I was writing curriculum. I was writing skits. I was managing teams of volunteers. I had little kid drama teams and little kid dance teams that somebody else led because I'm not a dancer. And, little kid worship teams and a little, like I said, to the drama team. And through that, I learned really how to manage volunteers. And after 2010, I decided I really wanted to go back to sort of freelancing. I was still doing I was still going back and forth and being stuff at the Folger every so often as the Mistress of the Rebels for their children's festival off and on. And then I was an adjunct faculty at Baltimore County Community College, CCBC. Anyway, Community College of Baltimore County, thank you. They had a program that worked with adults with special needs, either to prepare them for further academic stuff or with life skills. And so I did that for a while. I was still doing teaching artist stuff for the Folger. So basically a lot of it was, like I said, kind of, and I don't want to say it's like Forrest Gumping it through life where you just like happen to, right, to move, to go into things, because it really is different, not different, it's more like specialized than that. And at the same time though, it's really kind of using the stuff that is around you as an opportunity and seeing all the pieces, like when you look at a resume and you go, okay, how can I say that I had this experience because I've done
Right.
this, or I've had leadership experience. Oh, I led volunteers. Okay, that's leadership experience, right? It's really looking at everything, but a lot of it came through the things that came to me, but then I took those opportunities.
And then on top of that, you're the founder and artistic director of Building Better People Productions, as if you didn't have enough incredible projects going on. So can you talk about what led you to create this organization?
So I was at that point doing a lot of stuff for other great organizations. I was doing a lot of teaching artist stuff for other people, the Folger still at that point, for their programs that help kids, middle school and high school kids get ready for their annual Student Shakespeare Festival. And I was working for a local theater here in Annapolis, and directing some stuff. They had a youth ensemble and directing a bunch of stuff for them. And I was just really starting to feel like I could do my own thing, how you get that thing, like, I like this, and also I think I could do this. And I started writing a piece about empathy. It was 5 minutes that then turned into this longer 45-minute piece is where it is now. But just because people suck and they're repeating treating people suckily, and it was and is sometimes a source of anxiety for me when you look at the dumpster
Mm,
fire of the way that people treat each other often, and
yeah.
instead of it a really, I used to say, instead of punching people, I decided to write. But there's a piece, seriously, I want to punch people.
That's uh-huh.
I'm going to punch people.
Feed it into that. Feed it into something creative.
Exactly.
Yep.
So it grew into the first thing I ever wrote, which is called We Got It, the first actual show, which my theater company still does. It's about empathy, and it's a 3 vignette piece, which in the beginning, in the middle has like, what is empathy? Blah, blah, blah. Now we're gonna learn how to do this and that. But the third piece is about really about like shared loss and shared pain. And it was inspired, sadly, by the deaths of Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice. I was
Mm,
really, so I was pregnant when Trayvon Martin died, and I knew that I was having a boy, and a horrible story. And then it was like, okay, the life that could be set out for the child that I'm having that's not even born yet, but how
wow.
people regard Black men, and then Tamir. I think reading, I'm a pretty optimistic person. And some people are just trolls, right?
Mm-hmm.
And say things online just to make people upset. But some people really were saying evil things about children and not understanding, not seeing the loss of these children as they would see the loss of, their niece Becky Sue or whoever, right? And I'm sorry to any Becky Sue's listening to this. I'm sorry, I just use you as an example. Sorry, Becky Sue. Um, but all that to say is that I really saw how people disregarded the pain of other people if they didn't see those people as actual humans, because capable of the exact same emotions that they had themselves. And so I wrote a piece about a little boy with a giant teddy bear and a little girl with a giant stuffed doggy, and the little boy not understanding why this girl loves her doggy so much, because he doesn't see his friendship with his dog, with his bear, the same way as her and a dog. And then both go missing. And it's this thing of he not really caring when her dog was missing, when his bear goes missing. It's the most horrible thing. But
Oh, wow.
the takeaway is that she says, we each have a giant stuffed pieces of our heart missing. And it doesn't matter if yours is bear shaped and mine is dog shaped. Missing is missing. Sad is sad. Hurt is hurt. And then they find them and it's, oh, great. But I wrote that piece, and the shorter piece I was actually going to do as part of a theater festival sponsored by the theater that I was working at, but the timing of it didn't work out. So I just decided this is the push to do this myself. And I started. I didn't really know what I was doing. I might still not know what I'm doing. That remains to be seen. Um, but uh,
But you're doing it.
but I'm doing it, and that's something I'm finding out as you go along. I feel like we've been different things. We started in name in 2015, it's almost 10 years ago, but really we started programming in 2016. We started doing I was getting the play together, but we were doing classes for homeschool students as a way to get in some revenue. But I feel like we've gone, you all can't see this since it's audio, but we've gone like ups and downs. I sometimes became what other people thought I was going to be, thought I should be, right? Or what they saw a need for, which is great. But my goal was to always be touring schools, and to be taking my stuff to things. And I love public shows. I love when people bring their their kids to stuff. And there's always that like thought of, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I wonder who's gonna come. But sometimes you can only do that every so often when you're paying actors and you're paying for a venue, and only 3 people come, which is wonderful. And but that's not a sustainable that's not
Right.
a sustainable model. And so
No.
no, no, no. So that's how we started. I had something to say. I couldn't quite say it where I was. So I wrote something and decided to do it myself.
That's so profound because I think there are a lot of times when we may feel like we can do something specific ourselves, but we lack the courage the fortitude, because like you said, you can do all of the administrative work and three people show up, and you want to give those three people a great show, but in a capitalist world we cannot afford to spend all of the overhead and and actor fees and production costs just to entertain three people. And so we have to figure out how then to turn it into a viable business. And then your mission evolves, right,
Right.
around that. And the work that you have to do isn't all just about the joy of creating the art, but that does seem like a great piece in the end. And so you've been in professional theater for 30 years,
Mhm.
which is really incredible. Over all those years in professional theater, what have your experiences taught you about yourself?
Um, that I'm braver than I think I am. And it's a lesson that I forget, you know, for most people in this era, well, period, and specifically in theater, 2020 was a doozy for us, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
still, 4 years later, I still am, digging out of some debt. I will say that out loud, debt. Things I put on my credit card thinking 2021 comes, we're going to be great. And that didn't happen the way that I thought that it would. But I sometimes we, and I'm not going to say this blithely because sometimes things are hard and they're hard to get through. And sometimes things happen and they're so heavy that we forget the things that we did in the past. I did shows where I got in a van, the Kennedy Center shows, and we drove across the country in a 12-passenger van with the U-Haul behind us, and we did these wonderful shows. And I was, 28 when I went on my first show. And I remember my dad being like, what the heck? What are you doing? Like
Yeah.
and but that I was brave, that I met the people. And one of the people that I did the tour with is one of my closest friends. She does stuff with me now. Shout out Coley Aziza. But and my friend Karen Hearn. But that was brave. And it was brave to start my own thing. But I remember when I first started building Better People, I was calling people saying, hey, you have a homeschool group. Where do you use for what space do you use? And then getting in contact with their people and using their space for my classes, and calling venues and saying, hey, I want to do a show at your venue. What do I have to do that? And I think sometimes I've forgotten, because again, you sort of look at where you were, because we had a really great, um, especially our classes, business up until 2020, and actually kind of through 2020, because then we went online, and that was great. It wasn't a great time, but it was good that we were able to do that. But then 2021, when people started doing things in person, it just wasn't where it was. And so sometimes when you look at things not going the way you want them to go, you kind of forget that you're a badass who did badass things and can continue to do those things again. And so that's the lesson that I am still like telling myself, because I'm moving into other venues, and also remembering that this is what I do. Like, I've done some other work for other people, which was great, but I realized I could put some of that time into building up my own stuff. And,
Yeah.
and that's such a thing. I mean, again,
That's what badasses do,
that's
right?
what badasses do. And I have to say, I mean, again, I'm very blessed that I have a husband who is makes most of the money right now, so we can have this house while I'm figuring things out. But it's not that I'm tinkering, but I had somebody say to me when I first started in business, are you a business or are you an expensive hobby? Is it an expensive hobby?
Mm.
And I was like, ooh. And I
Mm-hmm.
say small businesses sort of go back and forth with that while you're figuring it out, because most of us don't have large backings when we start, right? And a big like fault safety net, and people who are always going to be with us to do all of the things, because we know we can't support everybody's Boy Scout troop every time they have a fundraiser. You go, now I'll do your Boy Scout
Right.
troop, but now I'll do your child going to cheerleading championships or like whatever, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, that's the biggest thing, is remembering that through all of this, I'm a person who started this, and I still, as long as I want to do it, have the capacity to be able to work it and make connections. And when I do those things, things work. It's when I forget often that that sound like the unsinkable Molly Brown. But it's sometimes when you forget that sometimes things don't go as good. So it's like giving myself grace, but remembering that I still have the capacity to do good things.
Yeah, it sounds like reflection is a big part of that. Yeah. Like just being able to stop yourself and reflect to bring that information back to the forefront of what you know you're able to do and what you've accomplished. And I think what you said about is this project a business or an expensive hobby is a really important point, because I think whichever one it is at any given time, if you know what it is, then you know how to approach it. I don't think I think sometimes when people, especially when it comes to theater, people want to sort of say, again, going back to what we were saying before, is this real? Is this a real thing?
Right.
Just because we live in a capitalist society and everybody's always thinking about monetization versus what if it were an expensive hobby? Is that a bad
Right.
thing? It's actually not if you think about it. Like how beautiful that you could even afford to have us an expensive hobby, but at the same time, it's not sustainable if you don't have the backing, like you said, right? And balancing those sort of two profiles of an organization is really hard, but how beautiful that that you have the bravery and the gravitas to do it. You are also on state and county rosters for arts and
Yeah.
education. Can you describe what that's about to be a teaching artist, or or representing an organization, but to be on the roster of a state or a county arts program?
Right. So I think nationwide, but I can speak more about Maryland, is that there is the Maryland State Arts Council, which promotes the arts and supports artist organizations and individual artists and people who want to have art here in Maryland. And then there are also separate county arts councils who specifically support those things in their individual counties. And a lot of, actually, I think most of the arts councils here have some kind of arts in education initiative where they support and fund schools or other nonprofits, whatever their setup is, to have artists come to their school, library, museum, whatever, to do their things with those, for those folks. And a lot of these arts councils have rosters of, or lists of people who have applied, been vetted some sort of way to be a part of their rosters. And so people can look at those rosters. Either there used to be, I know Arundel used to have like a paper roster, which I don't think they have anymore, and now it's everything is online, but they can go online and say, oh, I want a show about Maryland history. Oh, this person does a show about Maryland history. And then they see what they cost, and then they do them. And then there is funding for some of these things where if you're on these rosters, schools can apply through those roster organizations to receive grant funding so they can bring you out. And so that way they're getting what they need, but the artist is also getting paid. And
Hmm.
and I will say this, if you all haven't noticed this, I have ADHD. And so I just found that out specifically last year. And I will say that meds and therapy is wonderful, are wonderful, wonderful
Hmm.
things,
Hmm.
because I found out that there are things that were in front of me that I hadn't been accessing. And I know a lot of that is a function of being ADHD, that some things that come like duh to other people, right, don't come like that to me. I have to sort of sit and think about and easily get overwhelmed with possibilities. All that to say is I finally finished the application for the Maryland State Arts Council's teaching artist roster, and I got on, hooray. And so
Yay.
yay. And so that's been on since last December. And so didn't
Hmm.
really get any folks through there last year, but I'm really setting out now to use that really as more of a calling card, because there are people who make a lot of money being as artists being on those rosters, and then they continue to do things for other people. But yeah, that's what it basically is. And it's really wonderful that there is funding for artists and that art is valued enough that people want their schools to have it. You know, it's really wonderful.
Yeah, it's important to let folks know that as an artist, you have a lot of opportunity and avenues to build a tapestry of a career, right? And sort of allows you to have that defense where folks are like, how can you pay your bills? How can you take care of yourself? Is it one gig? Usually, no. One gig's
No,
not going to give you what you need, right? But like you talked about, doing work in the morning and then doing the artistry in the evening, or vice versa, making it work until you do have these pieces that can be placed together like a puzzle to create your career. And some years are better than others. Some months are really good. We may know that in the month of February, if you're Black, you're getting a lot of calls. You might be getting a lot of gigs, and then maybe March and April get a little quieter. And a part of this whole picture, right, is letting people know, hey, you can call Black folks any time of the year. You don't have to just focus on February and things like that. But just how we can continue to support folks who are emerging into this work, letting them know that there's all kinds of ways to make your living as an artist. So moving on to social emotional health.
yes.
Post pandemic, education administrators began to identify social emotional health as a key focus in the healing of young people from this collective trauma that we experienced for 2 years. We talked about that. And I want you to tell us, what is social emotional health, first of all? And then how do you address it in your work with young people?
So it's so funny. It's one of those things where people go, "What is bread?" And you look up, "Oh, could I really tell somebody what like bread is?" So I had to really like look up.
Yes.
But basically it's simply it's being aware of who you are as a person and growing up your own sort of like self-esteem and self-view, and then how you deal with other people, and how you see sort of their humanity. And it's sort of like how you it's the basics for how you go through life with yourself and with other people. And that sounds so vague, but it's really the building blocks of um my husband is an introvert and he uses the word people as a verb. He goes, "Oh, I can't go because I have to people. Oh, I've done too much peopling today." And it's
Uh-huh.
it's learning how to people. It's learning how to successfully and healthfully yes, be around other people without sort of losing your sense of who you are too.
I love that. And you do that with young people. You work on that. You
Yeah.
create work that highlights and develops that in young people. Can you talk about that? And you did talk about it a little bit with empathy. Are
Mhm.
there other sort of aspects of social emotional health that you explore?
Yeah, so the first show was about empathy, and then we did a couple of other things that other people wrote. This wonderful show called Zombie Thoughts.
I
It was
like that title.
it was great, written by my friend Jenny Kokai and her son Oliver, who it's about anxiety, and her son had I think he was 11 when they wrote it. It's generalized anxiety disorder, and it's a two-person show where the two characters are avatars in the video game, and the audience are the players, and they learn about anxiety and where you go, and you have to learn all of the tracks because the kids can decide that you're going to go elsewhere. That was a great show. So we've done anxiety. We've done again other couple of shows that done that we've gotten from other places about like imagination, childhood imagination, and how even when you're a big kid of 9 and 10, it's still okay to play because play is the basis of everything. And we do a show about it's a wonderful show called Dream House, a rainy day play that we got from Youth Plays that's about childhood fears. And then with the other shows that original shows that we've written and done, we have a show that I wrote called Feeling All the Feelings that I wrote post pandemic about emotional health and about it's a one-person show directed by the wonderful Danielle Drakes, and it's about feeling everything even if other people think it's unpleasant, like, and really like it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be excited, even when other people think you're not supposed to be excited, right? And that we all go through those things. And it's seen from the view of a young girl, a fifth grader, but also her mother, and her mother thinking that she's doing a great job by saying, no, you're really brave. You're not scared. You're not hurt, when really the kid is. And it's sort of figuring out like what all that looks like. And then we just wrote a show that we're doing for 0 through 6 year olds called Bringing Back the Sun, that's about teamwork. And I am writing a show, about to do a show with another arts group that's actually getting out of SEL, but it's about opioids. But there's actually sort of SEL in that too, because one of the things they talk about is it's about decision making, right? And that's part of it, is how am I using my brain? Someone else says I should take this or do this, whatever. All of that is connected. And then I'm actually, I mean, this hasn't even started yet, but a friend of mine and I, she has a business that does a lot of DEI work. And we're doing a piece, and then she's going to do the workshop about toxic masculinity. And this is going to be for elementary through 8th grade. And it's going to be a one-man show. That's the way we are doing it. And I have an actor already. We just have to like write it. We're focus grouping it and all that stuff. But it's again, boys feeling like they can't feel certain things, or they can't be certain things, because that's not what a boy does. And those things cause reverberations in personal lives. And also, look where we freaking are as a country, with the former president who wants to be president again, who has gotten people enthralled because they see him as hyper masculine, because he's a bully.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you're exploring this with very young children in those early stages before they start to develop these tendencies, so they can recognize them when they see them. That's really powerful. But you also work with adults, right? You
Yes.
have the Empathy Works program, and that you put forth in adult settings. What is the Empathy Works program all about, and how does that differ from your work with children?
I mean, I will say this, to be completely honest, Empathy Works program we've developed, but are just starting to sort of get out there. And so
Okay.
it's Kalicia Thorpe Price and Jennifer Ridgway, who are local DC area, but then actually all over. They're based here, but they do work all over, theater teaching artists. And it's a program for adults, and specifically for organizations and companies, that basically promotes empathy, and to basically sort of reimagining what your policies and your culture would look like if you were thinking of other people when you did those things, and thinking of that you might want a vacation, well, they might want a vacation too, right? I mean, just
Right.
simple
Imagine.
imagine, just simple things like that. And so again, and I have to say this, and it's the truth, it's one of those things that you tell people about and they go, that's amazing, and then you're looking for people to book you, because then it's sort of going through to the next thing. I mean, and I will say this too, when I first started my empathy program for kids, there were a lot of bullying not pro bullying, right? But there were a lot of anti-bullying programs, and people were booking those because that was kind of, I mean, we need that.
Yeah, but that was definitely a thing for a good while. Definitely a lot of
It
anti-bullying,
was
cyberbullying, and stuff like that.
all of the stuff. And I feel like I thought, well, empathy is kind of like the foundations of that. Like, if you don't see people as the same as you, it makes it easier to treat them badly. So we're starting sort of on this, and maybe that didn't sound as sexy, but now when you say empathy, people are like, oh my gosh, yes, 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 we need. And so we're trying to get organizations to see that this is an important thing. And we did it last year. Center Stage in Baltimore did a festival. It's called Homegrown Festival. Basically, they were highlighting local talent, and so they had artisans and people selling earrings and stuff. I have wonderful earrings that I got from there, but they also had performances and they had talks. And so we did this as a talk, and we got young people who were starting arts organizations, but also people who were veteran artists. And the idea is that we all need at every level, you need to think about who you are now, who other people are, but often we forget what it was like to start as a young person or a person who was new in your situation. And a lot of times we've told ourselves that the things that we needed when we were younger, nobody needs now. And it's
Mm,
fine to create policies that don't really speak to people. I mean, like for example, now the people who are trying to get rid of remote work, when people did that for 2 years, and now it's suddenly germane for you to have to be in the office. So really kind of sitting
hmm
back and saying, okay, what are these decisions coming from? Are they just coming from because that's the way things are supposed to be? Or am I really breaking them down and seeing what do I need as a person may be the same thing that you need? And that doesn't mean that people come in an organization new making six figures, right? That doesn't mean that at all. You still have to build up to things, but it's the basic tenets of humanity that I think would force or cause organizations to work more harmoniously. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do it on both levels where people come in like individuals and then kind of take these teachings out to where they are. And also, what we mostly have in mind too, though, is to have organizations hire us to do stuff. And like I
mm,
said, like the
hmm
thing we did at Center Stage, we've also pitched this to arts organizations and arts festivals and conventions and conferences, right, as a talk,
It's like a breakout, a
right? Like a
talk.
breakout,
Yeah.
right?
You mentioned emerging arts leaders and veteran arts leaders having conversations about the field and promising practices and just offering toolkits to each other, right? As an arts leader yourself, what would you share with an emerging arts professional who's interested in getting involved with TYA specifically? Because that's your area. But if there's sort of a general bit of advice, would love to hear that as well.
To treat people well. And that again, that sounds so general and vague, but you want to be the kind of person, not where you're kissing people's asses just and it's not genuine, but you want to be the kind of person that people want to work with. I am confident, confident. Well, that sounds bad, but there's work that I've gotten because people wanted to work with me because they thought working with me would be a pleasant experience. And maybe there were other people who might have on paper been more quote talent, not talented, but you know what I'm saying? They
Maybe
could have
like
worked
more quote unquote qualified
exactly
in theory, right?
in
Yeah.
theory, but they went with me. And then again, it doesn't mean to, like I said, Forrest Gump, right? To just kind of pleasant and tap dance your way through and not have any of the bona fides. But it means so that as you're gathering all that stuff, you can be nice to people. And that doesn't mean denying yourself of your own and being a people pleaser, because I've done that too. Don't do that where you're hurting yourself,
hmm
but to just continue to see people as people. And it's something I'm going through now, right? As a person who hires contractors, do I want all the information? Would I want to know where I'm supposed to be and what the where food is? How
Yeah.
can I get to stuff? Wouldn't I want to know those things? So isn't that the kind of thing that I should let other people know if I'm the one in charge? And so again, it's treating people well and remembering, going back to empathy, as you're starting to lead people, the things that you wanted when you were an employee or a contractor or a cast member. There were these two young ladies who we met when we did that Center Stage thing last year, who were in their early 20s. They were graduates of Baltimore School for the Arts High School and had just graduated from college, I think. And two young Black women. And then I ran into one of them at Maryland Arts Day, which is a lobbying day when arts leaders go to the Maryland State House here in Annapolis and talk to their representatives about arts funding and stuff. And she walked up to me and was like, "Hey, you did that thing." And she said that she was really inspired by the things that Kalisha and Jennifer and I said at that thing last fall. And
Wow.
it resonated that you need to treat people well and you need to use that as the way that you are cutting through life. Again, we see so many examples of people who are jerks who somehow survive and thrive, and God bless them. And is that the way? Does it mean that when you get to a certain level, you have to be a jerk? Does it mean that if you're directing a show and it's tech week that you have to cuss everybody out because you're frustrated? No.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that we've accepted as standard practice because that's the way it's been, but that's not the way it has to be.
Yeah, and I love that you're pushing forward with change because you're right. It doesn't have to be that way. And some people fall into playing certain roles because they think it has to be that way. And it doesn't occur to them that they're the ones who have the power to change it, that just don't be that way. It
Don't
seems simple and straightforward, right?
don't be that way. And again, it doesn't mean that you
Yeah,
have to let people walk over you. I mean, I directed a show for
right.
somebody else a couple of years ago, and a couple of days, within the week of tech, there were people who still didn't know things, and we had to have kind of like a come to Jesus, rehearsal where it was like, it's not just about, it is about the show, but it's also about the fact that you all are going to be out on stage not knowing what you're doing, and so, and they got it together, and it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful show. So there are ways of like, again, it's not just about being, oh, whatever, we don't care, blah, 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 because sometimes there's a place for that, but other times, you're a professional and people are paying you and people are paying for tickets, so you want to give them as good of a show as they can get. And at the same time, again, to get there, it doesn't mean that you have to break people down. We think that to
Mm-hmm.
be a great actor, to be a great whatever, that you have to have this traumatic story, and great things can develop out of trauma, but you don't have to create traumatic situations for people to thrive. You
Yeah,
don't. The trauma's gonna come anyway. It's gonna
that's true.
come.
That's true. And I love that you do the early work for young people in terms of building out and expanding their emotional vocabulary so that they understand that anger, grief, those harder emotions aren't the only ones they have. And while yes, of course, it's important to feel all the whole range of emotions, but when you have a better understanding and connection to your emotions as a person, that whole span of emotional vocabulary you have, you're able to make other choices when you're in a tough situation. And so that leads me to wonder what inspires you most about working with children, going back to the young people. Children can be so interesting to work with and to present to and to work for. So what inspires you about them?
I love their honesty. I love when they like something, you will know. When they don't like
Yep,
something, you will know. When
that's true.
when you look out and kids are falling asleep, or you're like, oh, I maybe need to change that, or do something that you build in movement breaks, so you do things. But I remember when I worked for Kaiser, one of the things that they said, and it's one of the things that I have taken, is, and it's why my organization is called Building Better People, is that when we are younger, there's so much that we don't know. It's one of the things that I loved about working at the Folger. People would say, you're doing Shakespeare with third graders, isn't it hard? I'm like, but kids know that there's so much that they don't know. To them,
Mm,
Shakespeare was just one more thing they didn't know, right? And so it was like,
mm-hmm.
bring it. It's when we get older and we start thinking that because we've gone in a certain direction, we're no longer qualified or able to learn anything new, that things that seem newer or harder seem more difficult. Maybe they are, but we still can do those things. And so I love that kids, like I said, are honest about what they want to do. And sometimes kids can be like, well, I don't want to do that exercise. When sometimes instead of getting upset about it, being like, okay, well, everyone else is doing it, great, I'll see you when we do the next thing. And sometimes if that's not working, well, maybe you don't want to be here and we'll figure out what that
Yeah.
like. But I don't know. I just love that they are open books, but even that's why it's good to start younger though, because even younger, I do workshops around my feeling shows with preschools and kindergartners a lot. And sometimes you'll say, oh, do you ever get scared? And you have at least one kid that goes, nope. do you ever get angry? You have at least one kid who goes, or they go, no, because they've been told that they're not supposed to be those things, right? And
Yeah.
so it's good that they're honest and that you can see it there. And they'll tell you crazy, crazy, crazy stories of things. And oh, then they'll tell on their parents, my mother yelled at me, or then you're like, okay.
Oh, the kids are always going to spill the tea on the
They're
parents.
gonna spill the tea on everybody.
Yes.
It's so good. But yeah, I love that again, that and not in ways that sound manipulative, that you can manipulate children to be whoever you want them to be. But again, I believe if you hit them with really good, and don't hit children, is something I'm saying. If you hit them with really good sound bites, information that's positive and can help, it starts. I mean, because we see that now. We see people who are deprogramming themselves from harmful
Yeah.
things that they were taught or saw. They were either taught through words or but saw through their eyes the way that the world worked. And if you challenge those things early, those are the foundations that they have. And they start to see other possibilities besides what they've been told and what they're currently seeing
Hmm.
where they are.
You co host a fantastic podcast called Fine Beats and Cheeses. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about what led you to create that project?
So my sister, and so Thimby was on our show a couple weeks ago, and
Ooh, ooh.
that will be on soon. My sister wasn't there. It's usually my twin sister Leslie Gray Streeter, who is a columnist for the Baltimore Banner. She's worked for 30 years. She's worked in, well, 31 actually, in professional as a journalist, and she also has a memoir about her first year of widowhood called Black Widow, which is amazing. And she just sold a novel. And she and I listened to a lot of podcasts, and we're like, well, we're funny. We have things to say. What do we want to do a podcast about? And after a ill-fated like Zoom based, just like on Zoom video thing that we tried like during the lockdown portion of the pandemic, we decided, we were like, okay, we always have loved things that other people thought were cheesy. Like, I used to be a New Kids on the Block, a big New Kids on the Block fan, or that sort of thing. And it's interesting to listen to other people about the stuff that they love because they love it. It's like what you like. And so we invite people on to talk about the things that they love, especially if those things are things that other people would say aren't great. And it's not so much them coming on and defending the thing, but it's just sort of like why you love the thing. Like we had a Swiftie on, a Taylor Swift fan, come on, and she loves Taylor Swift. Not she loves her music, but it's because of who Taylor is as a person, who's kind of like taken her life back after losing her music catalog and re-recording all her own stuff. So she owns it. And she thought that was such a bad chick move that she's like, I need to follow this person. And so it's been so fun. And we've had everybody from, my mom and my stepdad. That episode we have to redo, talking about Murder She Wrote. Now, yeah, about Murder She Wrote, with my stepdad rolling his eyes but chiming in because he actually secretly likes it. And wonderful guests like Thimby, who, well, give it away,
Yeah.
talking about like being old heads and the music that we like. And then we've had people who are national figures. Jonathan Shack, who was the lead singer for The Wonders in that movie, That Thing You Do, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. He and my sister became Twitter friends, and so he was on our show talking about Roadhouse. So it's been really. We're about to have well, I should say this, a former member, Black female member, cast member of SNL, Ellen Claycorn, who hopefully will be on our show soon. Um,
Wow.
Hopefully that's supposed to be happening. But anyway, it's been just fun to have conversation with people, because what comes out usually in these conversations is that, going back to the whole feelings thing, right, is that our society has told us that earnestness and honesty are things not to be.
Hmm.
And when people have these conversations about honestly loving the things that they love, it's promoting, I think, mental health, in that I don't need to care about what other people think about the fact that I love this thing, that it's okay to really like stuff. And in this, era of work, 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 how lovely it is that we get to spend a couple hours on a Friday talking to people about bubblegum music and, the Jackson Five. And, I read a show just came out this week about One Tree Hill. I watched when it came out, and then I got hooked because I started watching it for this show. Yeah, it's really fun. And we would love for you to listen to us. We're Five Beats and Cheeses. We're on most platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're sort of like everywhere. And we'd love for you to listen to us and maybe come be a guest.
I am so grateful that you were so kind and patient with me as I struggled with, well, I'm not sure what I'm gonna talk about, and I don't know if it's gonna sound interesting. And when I jumped in with you all, it was just so fluid and fun, and it felt so good when I was done with the conversation because I was just like, what was I worried about? You're just a fantastic host, and I love the experience.
Thank
And
you.
of course, and it felt like self-care to me. It was self-care to explore that. So to your point about mental health and how fun it is talking about things that you're interested in, and how you can feel yourself go down into that really fun rabbit hole and get into the details of things. Self-care, though, is something that we really should be implementing in our day-to-day life. And I'm curious how you implement self-care with so many projects and being a wife and mother. How do you fuse self-care into your day-to-day existence?
I like listening to podcasts. That's what I listen to them in the car. I listen to them when I'm working. If I can, not so much usually when I'm writing, because sometimes having other words in your literal other words in your head, but then I listen to music. But I love listening to podcasts. I love to read. It's something that I'm trying to make more time for. I love going away. So my husband, the introvert, has, for as long as I've known him, we've been married for 14 years, but together for like 16 years, was taking sabbaticals where once a month he would take a weekend to kind of be by himself. And when we first started dating, he was like, oh, I can't hang out this weekend because it's my sabbatical. I was like, you're who? You should want to hang out with me. But I loved that idea. And then I came to really value it for myself. When we were still dating, there was a year I took myself to a bed and breakfast by myself in Pennsylvania,
Mm.
and I wound up getting snowed in. And it was lovely. I was the only guest, and I felt like a little princess. Like they were making dinner and breakfast just for me. And I walked. It was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I walked to other places, but it was. I remember thinking, I don't want to be in my own head for 3 days, but it was lovely. And so after we got married, I was like, I want a sabbatical. And he went and wrote it on the calendar and scheduled me having
Mm.
sabbatical. So once a month we do that. And it can be as elaborate as the times I've taken myself away, as I'm like the other day I went and got Chinese Indian food from buffet, but got it in a container and ate it in my car and read a book. And then I went to a coffee shop and read a book. And I felt so great. And this past March, I took myself away on kind of like a writing retreat because I had two things to write, but kind of halfway through it, I was like, and it was back to that same place I'd gone in 2009, but some in Lancaster. But then at some point I said, no, you really are going to sit here and binge watch CBS's show Ghosts. And that's what you're going to do because that's what you need. And then Cowboy Carter had just come out, and then I listened to Cowboy Carter all the way home. And it's taking time for the stuff that you like. I just saw a thing that said every day you should be giving yourself 1 hour to build into yourself. They're like, that's 1/24th of your day. When you think about it like that, it's not a lot. And it could be maybe it's your workout, maybe it's you do yoga, maybe you're meditating, maybe you go for a walk, you read, you watch a Hallmark movie. I like those things, but it's you're doing something to soothe your soul. And not everyone, like, you want to do the couples massages. My husband does not want to do a massage, so that's not good for him. I have friends who are single and live alone, so them going away by themselves doesn't feed into their soul because they're like, I'm alone enough.
I'm always by
I'm
myself.
always by
Yeah.
myself, right? And so it's finding the thing and having it be okay. If you don't like yoga and candles, don't do yoga and candles. But I know it's really funny. It took me a while to really ease into the fact that it didn't have to look the same way every time, and it didn't matter what it looked like as long as I was getting some sort of thing out of it. Because I would do this around Christmas, right? I'd be like, oh no, Christmas is the time of year where I get things, so I need to get the perfect thing, and if this day is not perfect, then the whole thing is bad. And it's letting go of that pressure for your self-care to feel like anything other than what makes you happy, and not having it to look like, again, what somebody else sees as self-care, or what you did last month, or what you did yesterday. It can be something different.
Wow, that's powerful. I love the prioritization of it for you, and you learning that from your husband and implementing that in your own life. That's a beautiful gift that a person can give their loved one. So, what is next for you? What kind of projects, rests, incubation? What are you excited about right now?
Let's see. So I have a couple of things that I'm doing that haven't been announced, that I can't like talk specifically about, but I
Mhm.
have I'm a playwright, and so I've written for myself, also for other people. So I have some things that are being produced by other people. Some online things that haven't been announced, so I can't announce yet. But that's been awesome, and I am doing one of my shows in a theater festival in another state in a couple of months, that again has not been announced, so I can't talk about it. But I spent like last week looking for Airbnbs for myself, because I'm going away to this thing and it's
Ooh.
very exciting. And so yeah, I have that. I'm always looking for opportunities for my shows to and workshops to do residencies to, either directed connected to the shows that I'm doing, or sometimes out of them. um just looking for more partnerships and more ways to bring the things that I do to people, and also get paid for it, because money, and it's a job. And
Mhm.
but yeah, I just want to continue to do the things that bring light to the world, but also bring light to Lynne Streeter Childress, and oh, and then, because I don't want to be miserable. And so yeah, that's what I'm looking for. If anyone listening, you have a theater company and you need a show, either for your students to perform or to be performed for kids, like by adults, hit me up. If you need someone to come, you need a show to come to your school or organization, if you need somebody to work with your teachers. I mean, we talked about Empathy Works, but I also do team building, like improv team building things for organizations. And that stuff has gone great. I have a program that helps groups write shows, like short shows, kids write short shows about some sort of message. And I've done that in public schools and also for other organizations. And so bbpproductions.com has all of the stuff that I do on it. And thank you for asking.
Yes, of course. And we'll make sure that that information is in the show notes as well for folks to click a good link. So, oh my gosh, this has been a really, really lovely conversation. You're
Thank you so
definitely one of
much.
my favorite people. Yes, of course. You're welcome. I had such a joy. I had such a great time talking with you. And I am hopeful that we get to work together another way, appear on each other's podcasts again, and just generally stay in touch. Yeah.
Please, no, Sam is our producer, loved you. You will be back. He's like, you're coming back. Yeah,
Yay.
you were so wonderful. And it's
Oh,
been
thank
really,
you.
Themby and I have known each other since like 2000
Mhm.
ish. And so it's wonderful to still be in contact with really cool people. And I love watching what you're doing through Facebook and such, and that you have expanded, like you said, and found ways to continue, using the arts in so many different ways and different venues. And so thank you. I think it's awesome. I think
Thank
you're
you.
awesome. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate you. Keybard is produced, directed, and hosted by Tim B. Duncan. Theme music by Psycho Sid. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe or follow and leave us a review or give us a rating. Your support helps Keybard reach more listeners, and it means the world to us. Episodes drop every Tuesday. Tell a friend, tell your mama now.